12:02, get started here. Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Dunlap. I'm managing partner here at Nauman Smith, and I thank you for joining us today. Nauman Smith is proud to be celebrating our 150th anniversary this year. We know that the strength of our law firm comes from the strength of our relationships with both our clients and the community, which is why we're so pleased to be joined by the many local businesses and organizations represented by each of you. Following today's event, you will each receive a copy of the presentation and additional support documents via email. As you saw from the automated notice there, this is being recorded, but only our presenters will be visible, no one else. All participants are asked to please remain on mute and to use the chat feature to submit questions. Our presenters will do their best to address your questions throughout the session. If there are questions we don't get to based on time, we'll circle back to those individuals following today's session with some answers for you. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters today. Ted Benchik is the newest attorney to join our team here at Nauman Smith. Ted is a bankruptcy attorney with over 30 years of experience helping his clients navigate some of the most challenging times in their businesses. He moved here in January from Indiana, and we're very pleased to have this new area of wisdom to offer our clients in the Harrisburg region. Next is Krista Darr, who is a Central and Northeast Pennsylvania Regional Commercial Executive for Fulton Bank. In her role, Krista leads the commercial banking teams in Harrisburg, Lancaster, Lebanon, York, State College, Berks, and the Lehigh Valley. Fulton Bank is a subsidiary of Fulton Financial Corporation, which is a $25 billion asset regional financial holding company headquartered in Lancaster. Fulton operates approximately 200 financial centers in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and Virginia. Fulton offers a broad array of financial services while maintaining the strong personal relationships and community support customers have come to expect and appreciate. And then finally, Melissa Stone is the VP of Economic Development at the Harrisburg Regional Chamber in CREDC. The Harrisburg Regional Chamber is nearly as old as Nauman Smith, having been founded in 1884. Recognized as one of the largest, most dynamic organizations of its kind, which has just got another 5-star rating, by the way. The Harrisburg Regional Chamber and Capital Region Economic Development Corporation has combined a unique blend of business, community, and economic development services under one roof to improve the region's economic vitality and quality of life. And I'd just like to add that I know Melissa from my work and my various roles on the CREDC board. She's a good person, a professional person, and I hand it over to Melissa to get started.
You're too kind. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to Nauman Smith for including me in this opportunity to talk to our businesses and our community. I figured that the way we would kick this conversation off is before getting into, well, what do we do next? Let's review a little bit of what we saw going through it. As a regional chamber and a CEDO, or Certified Economic Development Organization by the Commonwealth, we're charged with a mission to kind of assess and monitor the health of our region, our economy, our industry, and our business climate. So during the pandemic, we started to collect some information and monitor trends. Some of it was by design, strategic initiatives. Some of it was just, being a trusted resource in the community that we wound up being sought out for information. And that's pretty much the primary role that the chamber provided during this whole thing. Starting in 2020, we found ourselves being an educator, an advisor, and just a resource for everything possible. The CREDC side, the economic development arm of the chamber, we found ourselves doing that and administering a lot of money, but for some, not enough. So let's go backwards and take a look. So when this first kicked off, we always get inquiries every day, but quite honestly, we were blown away with the amount of inquiries. And I put up there a figure, which is kind of a rough average of what we were seeing at first. That's in phone calls only. There's no way we could count all of the text messages and emails and all of that kind of stuff going on. We found ourselves in a place where we took on the responsibility for making sure people could get information. We followed that up with a resource page, which is still out there, but not nearly as relevant right now, which is a good thing. But the resource page, we decided to make sure that focused on not only like the businesses, employers, but employees, because just the general public was very much in a panic mode. And we were some of the first to get out there with webinars on the programs that were coming out, like the payroll protection program and the economic injury disaster loan program, the very first small business grant that the Commonwealth put out. But before that, even CREDC was, and all of the CEDO network, that Certified Economic Development Organizations network across the Commonwealth, was charged with rolling out the very first Commonwealth program. It was a loan. It wasn't even a grant. It was basically designed to just do anything to build up cash reserves and a working capital base for businesses to be able to weather this. So if we could move on to the next slide. CREDC, as I said, economic development organizations across the state were charged with making sure that money could flow to businesses. And they came in all different shapes and sizes. QUICA, COVID Working Capital Assistance Program, was a loan. It was one of the few loans. Almost everything else after that was a grant. We administered that loan program, as well as hazard pay for employees in essential businesses like grocery and healthcare. We assisted Dauphin County with their nonprofit grant. We also, and still are, assisting the city of Harrisburg with a small business relief grant. And CHIRP, which is the COVID Hospitality Industry Recovery Program, is another one that we have administered. I should have taken the time to actually add up the numbers, but let's just go with the one that's most recent in my head. The COVID Hospitality Industry Recovery Program we administered on behalf of Dauphin and Perry counties. There were over 140 businesses that got $4 million-ish in benefits and assistance. And the other programs that we do all the time, but we used specifically to gather information about COVID, is Commonwealth programs such as Engage. That's just it's a business calling program. It's designed to make sure we have our thumb on the pulse of the economy. Industry partnerships, which are very select, like manufacturers and technology and healthcare. And then PREP, which is the Partnership for Regional Economic Performance. And that's an 8-county region that we help to coordinate. So going through all of those things, what did we gather out of this? Well, first of all, the very first program with the loans, all industries were scrambling, all of them. We were overwhelmed with applications. We had to shut down our application window. This was the very first program. You did not even need to show impact at this point. It was too early. There was some assessment of that, but really this was a manner of budgeting, what kind of expenses that you need to cover. The city's small business grant, what we learned there is that, in the city with very, very small businesses, a lot of them with less than 5 full-time employees, we have realized that there's probably a need to educate those businesses and increase their capacity for financial literacy in their business, as well as just, how to maintain records and implement a different kind of tracking source. So that's been the slowest of them all. And the hospitality program that we administered, honestly, what was interesting there to us is, that was the very last one administered. We're now a year into the pandemic, and thankfully, we're happy to report the restaurants were not as badly hit as we thought they would be. I'm not saying they didn't experience impact. I know they did. And I hate to use the word pivot because who can't think of Ross on Friends when you say that, but quite honestly, that's exactly what the restaurants were able to do. They were able to change up how they delivered their product and their service. Hotel revenue, however, that was scary to see, because if you think of a hotel, what are they going to do? They provide a bed and a shower and hospitality. It's done right there on site. What are they going to do? They're going to put their room and deliver it in an Uber. It's not possible. So they really saw some bad impact. Another interesting point from that is that there was maybe 2 out of 300 and some applications, businesses that had not received any other financial assistance. So truly, everybody was scrambling, and thankfully, it looks like everybody got something from some program. So that was good news. What's our own portfolio saying? Well, again, it wasn't all a walk in the tulips. Everybody experienced some kind of challenge. But I will say that we're very lucky. Our loan portfolio specifically is doing very well. Our portfolio, because of the nature of the Commonwealth loan programs, is very industry heavy, not as small business heavy. So industries have their own challenges, just different kinds of challenges. They have, at least in our portfolio, have weathered it a little bit better, and we're doing pretty well. So the last thing I'm going to do is give you some feedback from all of those other formal programs that we do to reach out to businesses all the time. It's just during the pandemic, we changed our questions. So the feedback that we got from all of those sources, and this covers everything, this covers the 8-county region of South Central PA, feedback from all of the EDCs combined in a report back to the state. We were able to determine, the top 5 industries impacted negatively in our area. Top 3 are absolutely not a surprise. Definitely the ones that were hit the most by mandated shutdowns. Educational services and healthcare, again, not so much of a surprise. If we can go on, thanks. So other notable feedback included information on broadband. Okay, the rural access problem, that's not a surprise. What was maybe something that we needed to step back and think on more is the fact that, okay, rural access was a problem, but a lot of urban areas struggled too, because they have great reliability, they have great speeds, but the cost of that can be prohibitive. And a lot of, urban areas with a different kind of, household income makeup, they have relied on libraries to do a lot of their internet searches and a lot of their online stuff. They can do it faster, they can do it safely, but a lot of those were not accessible. So that was an interesting impact that we came out of. Transportation in our region, we all know that I-81, 83, 76, 78, I mean, it's a disaster all the time. What we're realizing now is that's just going to be a prolonged thing. We all suspect that the pandemic has changed the way we shop and the way we do that. And if that's the case, it was already growing. It's definitely a change of tide. The trend that we have on attracting fulfillment centers and distribution centers and the truck traffic on those highways is not going to get better. So a plan for that is definitely needed. Teleworking was something that, okay, yes, we all know that people staying at home hurts business. It really disproportionately impacts some of the areas where their entire foot traffic for their business, even when they got back open, was devastated because people weren't there. The city of Harrisburg, and I'm sure other cities are exactly the same, but the city of Harrisburg, there are businesses that they question whether they should open up at all until maybe the Commonwealth comes back to their offices. So that's a micro market that was impacted. Everybody's turning to how do we get ready for the next wave of something tragic like this and switching to some kind of e-commerce. That's good news to hear that businesses are thinking strategically that way. And of course, liability has always been a concern for this whole thing. The last thing I want to point out is that our region we have a workforce challenge to start with. Before the pandemic, we had more job openings than people looking for jobs. During the pandemic, that's changed a little bit. Of course, there was unemployment. It definitely rose. I mean, you can see in April 2020, our unemployment rate was 14.4. By November 20th, November 2020, it was only 5.3. What's interesting in all of that, we still are having the exact same problem. We still have more businesses looking to hire people than we have people searching for jobs. And in fact, our labor force reduced during that time period, 2% reduction in the amount of people that are looking for work anymore. Why? We can conjecture all day long, but that's going to continue to be a problem, pandemic or no pandemic. So that's where we come from. Now let's see what we can do to go forward. That's definitely not me. Go ahead, Ted and Krista.
Okay. This is Ted Benchik, and as Ben pointed out, I'm new to this area, having moved over from Indiana. My area of practice is principally bankruptcy. Most bankruptcy attorneys don't always define their experience in terms of number of years in practice, but how many recessions they've had to go through over the course of their practice life. And this would be about number 3, probably moving into number 4, the way things have gone. Most business owners at some point, and I think COVID and everything tragic that came along with it has probably pulled this question, more to the fore, is you confront that question of, do you want to continue running your business? Even under ideal circumstances, business owners will have to face this question at some point. And as Melissa pointed out, a lot of business owners have had to confront this in a very stark and perhaps unplanned way. We put the slide up here that illustrates about 3 different paths to go through. There's the yes, the no, and the I don't know. Krista and I will be addressing each one of these potential outcomes. And if you want to jump to the next slide, we can go here to if you answer that question yes, and you wish to keep going, I would turn this over to Krista for a few moments. The issues that are on the left side of your slide really address more what you can do with your lender, with your banking institution, what kind of options they would have available to you. And then after Krista speaks for a few moments, I'll jump over to the right side of that slide and talk about some other options that would be available to you. So Krista, if you want to take it away.
Great, thanks, Ted. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and present this topic. I know to our participants, it may seem odd to see a banker and a bankruptcy attorney sharing a presentation together, but I do think that speaks to what the message I'd like to get across on behalf of all of us bankers out there, is that, we're not interested in putting people out of business. We really do want to work with our customers to get to the best solution. And so what I'd like to talk about as we go through these next 3 slides are things that we think you can do or should be prepared to do as you're working through what makes sense if you want to continue to run your business, or if you're not sure, or if you do want to exit your business. Obviously, to your banking partner, what's going to be important, and to you, is understanding how distressed is your company. So when I say that, I mean, have you done a cash flow analysis? So have you looked at the cash flow of the company, and is it able to support its debt service? Operations and debt service. If it can't support its debt service, what would either the debt service need to be changed to make it serviceable, would be one option, or how could you impact net profits by either increasing revenues or decreasing expenses, right? So I think understanding where you're at and how close to a point of either not being able to service your operations and your debt, or how close you are to getting out of that situation, right? So if you were in an industry that was impacted by COVID and you're working your way out of it, when's the turn for you, and can you show that to your financing partner? if you're doing fine, but you're in a decline, how much longer is it going to be until you run into a real cash problem? So understanding that for your company is really important before you go into a dialogue with your bank, so they understand how you're walking into the situation. The bank is obviously, if you're going to be asking them to make any kind of concession for you, whether that's waiving a covenant or, offering some payment relief, what sometimes can help that is a credit enhancement. So what can you bring to the banking relationship to enhance the credit? So that could be, is there additional collateral that could be pledged? It could be an additional guarantor, could be some liquidity that could be placed on reserve to help cover the shortfalls. And then we recognize the reality is sometimes it's just time to part ways with your institution, right? So again, no bank wants to force a customer out of their institution, but sometimes through years or whatever it may be, both parties get fatigued in the relationship. And so if you feel like you're getting there with your banking partner, have a discussion with them. Is now the time for me to find another banking partner? And hopefully you've established a trusting relationship that you can get that honest feedback. And if the other option might be an alternate lender or an investor, right? So if you build a plan, you have a cash flow for how you can get through, bank is a little unwilling to provide maybe traditional financing. Can they connect you, or can some outside investors help you find other funding sources to bridge that gap? So those would be all considerations you'd want to take before you would have a conversation with your banking partner. Ted?
Yeah, Krista, those are all really good and helpful suggestions. And I would say, and I've advised clients that the more, it's sort of like if you have a medical issue, the earlier that a problem is addressed can usually lead to a better outcome. Unfortunately, there are situations where a business owner, perhaps because they were so occupied with keeping things running and all the other day-to-day concerns that they have to address, and just, I think because of human nature being what it is, oftentimes there's a temptation to kind of not deal with some of these issues until the wolf is at the door, so to speak. And that's where I had a situation, for example, a little over a year ago. Someone called me up at about 4:30 in the afternoon. This is a business owner, said that he had a building that was scheduled for a tax sale the following day at 9:30. Was there anything he could do? This is kind of every bankruptcy attorney's nightmare because it's going to mean a very long night. But what I did, and we got it filed in time to have the sale at least put on hold, was a emergency Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. Chapter 11 is the form of bankruptcy that provides for continued operation of the business, usually by current management or ownership. Often it leads to, well, the first thing it does that I touched upon just a minute ago was something called the automatic stay. Whenever a bankruptcy is filed, no matter which kind, an automatic stay, as the name suggests, is automatic. It kicks in the day of filing, and it is designed to stop all collection activity. This is not done as a way, by the way, to frustrate creditors. What it's done, and it actually benefits creditors, it prevents a feeding frenzy from taking place, because without the automatic stay, what would happen is creditors would, upon realizing there was distress, kind of all jump in to try to get ahead of each other in line. You might have some creditors trying to grab a hold of collateral that might be necessary to run the business. The automatic stay basically says everything has to stop for a while the court, the bankruptcy court, and the other stakeholders, such as the U.S. Trustee's Office, the debtors, the creditors, all kind of assess the situation. But it often turns out to be a lifeline for business owners and individual debtors because it gives them a temporary reprieve. Phone calls stop, letters stop, judicial processes stop, tax sales don't go forward, at least for a while. Now, it's not indefinite, it's not permanent, but it does give some opportunity for all the parties to kind of get together and, again, assess the situation and figure out what needs to be done going forward. And I mean, I could talk about Chapter 11 probably all day, and you wouldn't want to hear me talking about it all day, but the essence of it is the debtor proposes a plan of reorganization to their creditors. The creditors, after they have an opportunity to review that plan of reorganization, have an opportunity to vote upon it. In some cases, the larger creditors, usually the 20 largest creditors, may be invited by the court to join what's called a creditors committee. They kind of act as a sort of steering mechanism because by definition, they already have kind of the most at stake here if they're the largest creditors. And a creditor who has a very small amount that's claimed probably doesn't have the time or the inclination to monitor the case that carefully or keep tabs on operations. So it's usually the creditors committee that's most involved in driving this process of working with the debtor, coming up with a plan, and generally kind of assessing what the viability of the enterprise is. Oftentimes, the members of the creditors committee are fairly sophisticated, larger financial institutions, banks, venture capital, hedge funds, those type of operations. They already know how this process works, and they can assess based upon the numbers they're seeing whether a reorganization is going to be feasible. If you're going to be going down that path, if you're a business owner, I usually say if there is a way to communicate this, mindful of individual sensitivities and the kind of human factors analysis of this. But again, if filing a Chapter 11 is something that's going to be in the cards, I'm usually one to suggest that you let at least your larger creditors know about this. Nobody likes surprises. No one likes, and people like unpleasant surprises even less. So, if it's necessary to pick up the phone, maybe call the person who's, your relationship manager or somebody at the bank that I think, and Krista can add what thoughts she has, but I think that's generally regarded as a positive to know what's going to be coming instead of just getting something in the mail from the bankruptcy court. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's a great call out, Ted. We certainly, as the bank, would want to know it as much as we could in advance. I would also say it's just to recognize that kind of action will likely trigger some change in the banking relationship in terms of who would be dealing with you directly. As Ted described the process, you heard that it's pretty complicated for the creditor side of the house, and that's not something relationship managers do every day. So typically that does then facilitate some kind of transfer to a special assets area. Again, we've had there's plenty of cases where customers have come out of special assets areas and returned back to their relationship manager. And that's the ideal scenario we love to see. So it doesn't mean when you switch in that period of time that there's not an opportunity to remain with the bank.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Krista. I mean, it doesn't mean that the relationship is necessarily over if both sides want to continue with it. And I found too that when the case is filed and the matter, the portfolio gets moved over into a different department, whatever it's called, then usually I'm dealing with folks who I may have dealt with before in previous cases, or people who, if I haven't dealt with them before, still have a lot of institutional knowledge about this process and remember, I'm not trying to speak for Krista and her employer, but banks want to get paid. They want to keep this, if possible, keep something going. It's already going to be a distressed loan situation. It's already going to be a problem from the bank's perspective. But as Krista pointed out, there are occasions where parties have been made whole, and the relationship can continue. But again, I would just stress, the earlier you can kind of get into thinking about what needs to be done, generally is going to lead to a better outcome. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is the this is alternative number 2. If the owner says, no, I'm ready to kind of move along. I've in some cases I've got some clients who've been started businesses 30 or even more years ago. They poured their life into it, but they're now getting into a point in their lives where they are looking ahead to something else, and there may not even be a financial distress situation, but that again, because of COVID, unforeseen situations have arisen, and I can take that up. I will hand off to Krista, and she can talk about some of the issues that would arise from the banking side of things if you're willing to move on and you're in a position to do so.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Ted. I mean, I think sometimes a business owner will come to this conclusion, whether it's because the company is distressed, but also, as Melissa described, all of the things that happened during COVID, as we've seen people exit the labor force. There are plenty of people who also want to exit the ownership force, if you will. They just don't want to go through one more cycle like they just experienced, right? So it's not uncommon after a recession or a significant economic incident that we see people wanting to sell their businesses. So distressed or not, if you come to this conclusion, you're ready to move on. The couple of things that we would suggest you consider are, who are potential buyers, right? So as people are looking to exit, who would be a likely buyer? Is it somebody existing in the company, or is it a competitor, someone in a like industry, somebody who would see value in the supply chain for if you're making a product perhaps, and you might fit in their supply chain. The third bullet point there talks about your banker. We as bankers often know customers who are looking to acquire and have assets and liquidity and capital to acquire. So, if you are comfortable talking to your banker about your intent, they may be able to help arrange somebody that they're aware of. There's also plenty of third-party providers out there that can help you. There's brokers and others that can help you market your business. And the last thing is, if your company isn't quite where you want it to be, how can you make it more appealing, right? So what are steps that you can take as you look to sell the company to improve the profitability, or make other changes that will make it more marketable to a potential buyer? Ted?
Yeah, all very good points. And I would just add to that when a business owner is looking to sell the business, this is also an opportunity for the business owner, in collaboration with their attorney, because there will be significant numbers of documents, some due diligence that might be involved. And that's where a good business attorney can also help. We have a number of attorneys here in the firm who do that work, have done that work for quite a long time. And that's, really, an attorney is not just, people tend to think of, someone who's trying to add friction or slow things down or make things more difficult. But actually in the business sale context, the attorney can be the business owner's best friend, because an experienced business attorney will know what things to watch out for. Are the payment terms that are being offered good or bad, or should they be modified, negotiated? You don't have to face this process alone, and certainly when you're in a position to sell for maximum value, perhaps as part of an estate plan, perhaps as part of realizing your lifelong goal of hiking all the mountains over 10,000 feet high or whatever like that. The business attorney can be very helpful and add value to that transaction. If you're in a situation where you're not able to kind of unwind this in a value added way, or maybe a less than voluntary situation, one other option to consider is the liquidation via a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. 11 is the reorganizing bankruptcy, but there's also Chapter 7, which is available to both individuals and to businesses. This allows for, in an individual case, for the discharge of most debts, not all. Again, this is a topic that can take up a lot of time, but the general rule is that for most individual debts, except for those that are not permitted to be discharged, or require additional showings in order to be discharged, it basically gives an individual the opportunity to exit from medical bills, credit cards, consumer debts, those, if a car has been repossessed and there's a deficiency that's still owed on it after the vehicle's been sold, that can be discharged. With businesses, it's a little bit different because there is no actual discharge. With a business Chapter 7, the businesses wound up, the assets are liquidated. There's no actual discharge that's granted. The theory behind this is that the business is now done. Okay, there's nothing left for it to do. It is not transacting any business anymore, and all the creditors have received a pro rata share based upon their status as either secured or unsecured creditors. So there's the terminology is slightly different, but really the end result is the same. The business is wound up, it's liquidated, and then the debts are paid from whatever is available to distribute. Now there's upsides and downsides to this. For some exhausted business owners who have seen perhaps their industry change, were affected greatly by COVID. There may be some appeal to a liquidation and ending the whole experience. That's certainly something that I've been hearing a lot more of than I was hearing, say, a couple of years ago. Usually business owners in general want to try to keep things going as long as they can. They don't want to just turn over everything. Again, I'm speaking in general terms, but there are situations where, and I've certainly advised that really going in Chapter 7 is what's preferable at this point. There may not be any family members who are willing to take over the business. And again, because of some changes in the economy at large, then all the shocks that came to the system as a result of the pandemic, that's something that people are looking at more than say they were a few years ago. One thing to keep in mind if you are considering a Chapter 7, and this also has some application to a Chapter 11, is that a lot of financing through banks, especially to startups, to entrepreneurial ventures, there may also be a personal guarantee that the bank requests at the time that the loan is made to the business. And this is something that I've had to tell a few business owners when I've looked over the documents. Well, when you file for the business, there's a very good chance that the bank is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, you gave us a personal guarantee of this debt, and now we're going to seek recovery from you personally out of your personal assets. That may need to trigger an examination of whether, in addition to the business filing Chapter 7, the person or persons who gave personal guarantees on any financing may also need to consider that possibility as well, especially if the amounts involved are fairly large and can't be satisfied out of an individual's own assets. Since we're not really talking much about individual Chapter 7, but there are some matters that an individual who's thinking about filing would need to consider as well, and some aspects to that. And that's where, again, an attorney can add value and walk you through what those options look like to kind of guide you down what the best path is going to be. The worst thing you can do is to just panic. The second worst, and whenever people panicking, they're not making good financial decisions. The next worst thing you can do is to play ostrich and stick your head in the sand and say, I'm just going to shut down. I'm not going to think about it. This is just all bad. And it's not good to, no, that's kind of going to lead to a situation where you're going to have minimal to no control over your destiny. where oftentimes if you get on something like this a little earlier in the process, there is the chance to navigate through a situation. I'm not going to say it's going to lead to absolutely nothing bad happening to the business or your personal finances. That's too rosy. But again, there are degrees of how things can play out, and usually getting to someone earlier in the process is going to be better than coming to somebody in the situation I described, where there's the tax sale of the business building that's taking place the next day. That tends to lead to very, very few options. Any more thoughts on that, Krista?
No, I think that covers that one.
Yeah. So I mean, there's, and as, just to add further what Krista said, just there are whole cottage industries of business brokers, outside investors. I've dealt with liquidations of a restaurant or sale of a restaurant. There are, just as there are realtors who deal solely with residential house transactions, there are folks who do nothing but market restaurants to other restaurant owners or people who are thinking of getting into that business. So knowing your industry, and a lot of times my clients are the ones who have the best knowledge about, well, yeah, there's somebody who came in to me the other a couple months ago, and he said he knew of somebody who might be interested in buying it. Well, okay, maybe talk to that person. If you have their contact information, reach out to them, because there's a situation where you're going to get a lot more value for your business, whatever industry you're in, if you can reach out to other folks within that industry and have a broker or someone who's very knowledgeable or can look at the books and decide based upon your cash flow numbers, based upon trends within the industry at large and the local economy. You can really get a lot better for your business for that asset than you would if you just say let's shut the whole thing down. And again, making decisions while under distress or in a panic will often not get you to the best place here. So then the next slide we have up here is the third one, which is I'm trying to figure this out. I'm not really sure. What are my options? We've talked about a couple of these already in relationship to the yes/no decision, but here again, what resources would you need to make an informed decision? Krista and the folks that she works with, can often provide a lot of very good information to their customers, their borrowers, about their financial situations. Would you say, Krista, I mean, is it not the case that a lot of times your own customers don't know a whole lot about where their business is? I mean, except for how many people came in the door that day?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ted. I think often, particularly, smaller companies or closely held companies, the owners are often operators or deeply involved in the operations of the company, and the financing piece may not be where their strength is, right? So it is good to rely on those that can bring value. I think those first two bullet points here, Ted, remind me that, it's really hard. Again, closely held businesses, small businesses, a lot of times the owners are the ones who have started it. They've put their blood, sweat, and tears into the company. And it's often very hard to come to terms with, I got to make this decision, right? So it becomes a little bit of the ostrich in the sand, right? Head in the sand, because it's just easier to avoid it. Or you get busy in the day-to-day operations, but really being able to step back and take the emotional element out of it. And I think sometimes your trusted advisors can help you do that. So whether that's your banker, your attorney, your accountant, it's those third parties who sometimes can help you, just say, all right, let's take the emotion out of it. And what's the situation here? So I would really encourage you to rely on that trusted advisor team that you have.
Now, I've had folks, come into my office who are extremely good at running their businesses and have superior analytical skills in terms of they've grown it from a very small operation to a very large operation. But as soon as you start mentioning things like, well, if you're ready to move on, What would you like this to look like? Do you want the business to continue? And often I find that there's been minimal thought given to that kind of question. Because they just always assume that this is what they were going to be doing forever. And you do get swept up in the kind of day-to-day, keeping the doors open, keeping your head above water situation. And it's sometimes a jarring question, but one that needs to be asked. Can you imagine a day when you're not the person who is, going into that business and running the show? But trying to arrange for an orderly, whatever it takes, whether it's a sale, whether it's winding up, whether it's passing the business along to a family member, the question needs to be asked, and the person doing the answering has to think about it real long and hard. And I always tell folks, don't give me your answer right now. I'm not trying to sell you a car. I don't want to say to, you've got to let me know right here and now what you're. This is a very not just business but very personal question, and you need to think about it for a while. Why don't you go away, go on vacation for a week, clear your head, and then come back and we can talk about it a little bit more, because it is. I mean, as Krista pointed out, there so many people have started something and they put decades, almost their entire working lives into something like this, and it has a very deep emotional component to it. It's not just gee, I don't like how the stock is doing. I think I'll just call it my broker and dump it. Or, I don't like living in this house anymore, so I'm going to call a realtor and get a for sale sign in front of it. I mean, this really, it ties very closely into people's sense of identity and self-worth, and you're almost kind of more in a non-practicing psychologist role where you're saying, I know that you've put so much into this. I've been with you the most of the time you've been building it up, and I have an idea of what it means. That's why you got to think about this real long and hard. And then trend lines and competition levels, that's something else to consider. And I'm sure, Krista, where you are, you guys monitor a lot of those trends in different industries that you lend into, that you can provide that kind of business intelligence that sometimes an individual owner may not be so aware of. Is that right?
Yeah, Ted, that's a great point. And a lot of times banks will use, we call it financial spreading software, but we take the financials of a company and put them into a system, which allows us to look at the ratios and key metrics on the financial side of the company. And by NAICS code, which is the industry code of the business, we can match that business to other others in that same industry. And so if you have the opportunity, you may want to ask your banker if they'll provide you. Sometimes we do it here at Fulton. We will provide our customers with a comparison of how they rank relatively. Is more like favorable or unfavorable versus the industry average. But it's a good resource to know where you stand versus your peer groups.
And that also probably helps when you're trying to assess, what the fair market value of that business would be to a prospective purchaser should one be out there, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other point to consider too, and this is very industry specific and even location specific to a great extent, is for a business owner, again, who's been doing this maybe for decades, the regulatory landscape can often shift. I can tell you from my experience, I came from a state that is known for having a fairly light regulatory touch. And just in the 6-7 months or so I've been in Pennsylvania, I've noticed that there is significantly more involvement by state government in various aspects of businesses. And I'm not going to get into that's a political choice that's made by the voters of each state, but that's just something that I've noticed. But for any kind of business, and virtually every business is going to have to deal with some regulatory authority at one point or another. There's that aspect of it as well, because if the political winds are blowing toward more regulation, more supervision or oversight by state and local government. That's something to consider as well, because almost always that kind of regulatory compliance activity is going to come with added cost. And so the cost is going to have to come from somewhere. Either you raise your prices, or you take a hit to your bottom line, or try to strike a balance between the two. And I guess, Krista, you've been here longer than I have. Is that something that is also a driver of some, business owners' decisions, what to do going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that you have to make all those considerations. Anytime that it's impacting your profitability, you have to think about, does it make sense?
Yeah. And then if the business owner is also considering some kind of a transfer to, say, a family member or a trusted associate, or somebody who's been working alongside for a long time, that's something too that requires really a great deal of thought. How many business owners have I run across who just kind of assume that their kids are going to want to take it over? And then to their shock and amazement, find out that the kids, finish school and move 4 or 5 states away and want to do something completely else. That's something that probably needs to be addressed if the owner really wants to, quote, keep it in the family. Make sure there's some buy-in from that next generation. Because you don't want to find that out too late, or if you put yourself in a position where there aren't too many good options, if the kids decide that that's not what they want to do, or if ability is a concern, or work ethic. If the next generation is kind of used to the nice things that the business can provide, but doesn't have that experience of starting it out from the ground up, and may not have that kind of work ethic, that's something that you have to kind of honestly assess. How many does that come up a lot in your situation too, Krista, where there's maybe a mismatch between what the owner wants and what the kids want? And
Yeah, for sure, Ted. I think sometimes, again, it's a little bit of the burying the head in the sand. It's difficult for families to have those conversations, and depending on the structure, when it becomes outside of the immediate family, if it's extended family that's ownership in the company, it makes it even more complicated. So I think, again, if you hear nothing else, hear the advice of talk to your family, your trusted advisors early and often about your intent. That has a lot of problems off at the pass. Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that you don't want to have coming up at Thanksgiving dinner for the very first time, because and you make a very good point too, where if you have extended family or diffuse ownership, not just single entrepreneur with 2 or 3 kids and deciding how to divide that up, but what if you have a business that's got some family members who are equity holders, some non-family member holders, you have that dynamic playing out. Someone might think that, well, my kid will do a great job of taking it over, but some non-family equity owners may not share that view. And so trying to resolve that issue, is obviously the more shareholders you have, obviously the more possible up and coming next generation participants, it can get very complicated, and it can end in tears. And I know of a very large business, a trucking business in Michigan, that the siblings, you couldn't decide what to do. There were conflicts within. I think in actually some issues regarding sibling rivalry and jealousies came to the fore, and unfortunately it wound up leading to about 10 years of litigation. I try to get people to avoid that outcome, believe it or not. If I'm doing my job right, or a business attorney's doing their job right, you can try to address these issues head on and not have to say to a prospective client, this is going to take 9 or 10 years to resolve. No one wants to hear that. But yeah, succession planning, it's very important as far as wealth transfer and other estate planning issues that could kind of grow out of this. But yeah, there's really, that's a conversation that also should probably take place sooner rather than later.
Okay, we're going to hand it back to Melissa at this time to talk about some tools for recovery that are available out there. And also, Melissa, if you have any comments on anything that Krista or Ted said.
Always do. It was really great to listen to both of you, and I really appreciate the combination of somebody that is an expert in bankruptcy stuff versus the lender that is, doesn't never wants to hear that announcement from their borrower. I think the points that you guys made are good about looking ahead. If you're not immediately asking yourself these types of questions, like, should I stay in it? Should I sell it? Should I walk away? But maybe you're just tired. This whole pandemic thing has made everybody so tired. Now's the time. Now's the time. Go talk to your lender. Just like Krista said, build a better relationship with them now so that you both can be prepared for whatever happens next. And there's a better working relationship there. Go talk to an attorney like Ted. If you're not filing, it's worth a little bit of an investment to understand it better, or even just business planning or succession planning. Now is definitely the time to try to avoid the next wrench that the whole world is going to throw at us. COVID was quite something, let me tell you. So ultimately, I think my best role on this panel is to maybe shed some positive lights on just the economy in general. We had some serious, heavy conversation going on here, and I'm not discounting anyone on this call who might actually be facing that exact question that Ted and Krista talked about. But for the sake of the entire region, I can say that we remain pretty resilient. I heard stories about people considering just closing down or filing bankruptcy very, very, very early on. I'm not saying that's not still going to happen, more in some industries than others, more in some specific neighborhoods than others. But at the end of the day, I'm hearing less and less of it, which I hope is a good sign. And as I said, our loan portfolio is looking pretty good. So we're hoping that that's semi-reflective and is a good sign. But if you you're not considering closing down or selling or whatever, but you're tired, you're feeling a pinch from the pandemic. This particular slide here talks about all the resources that are free to you, for the most part, to use. These are things that are there in normal times for all kinds of businesses, and they lend quite a bit of expertise. The SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, we have several of them in our area. They give free consulting, they have free resources. They have the same information that Krista was talking about. So if you're not with Fulton and you want to see where you compare with the rest of your peer group within your industry, they have that data. They can help you with that. They have expertise in a whole bunch of areas, including retooling operations, maximizing your, some web optimization kind of things. SCORE is another great free consulting, business planning type of resource. And when I talk business planning, I don't mean just for startups. I mean, like if you're retooling how you do what you do, that is the time to go back to the basics and write it all out. So great tools there. If you're looking at your entire debt structure and you are feeling this is a little pinched, number one, first talk to your lender. Second of all, there are other types of refinancing tools out there that might be beneficial for you, maybe just even in the short run. And I listed SBA refinancing tools as a possibility, really flexible repayment terms. And lastly, I listed chambers of commerce. Memberships are not free, but in the same breath, your value for ability to network and market your business, you get quite a great discount for those kinds of activities. Last one I'll mention is if you're in ManTech or if you're in manufacturing, ManTech and the Manufacturers Association in our area, very, very strong in helping you look at getting better efficiencies out of your your lines. So there's a whole bunch of ways to retool what you're doing now and make it better. The last thing I want to hit on is the fact that I don't think we're done with money. Okay. I think that there's more money coming. I did add the numbers. We issued about 300 checks to about 300 different businesses for over $8 million since this whole thing started. And with the American Rescue Plan, there's more coming. In what shape or form it comes, I don't know. I suspect some more will be in grants. I think some of it might actually come in the form of technical assistance. I think some of it's going to be targeted to those industries that are hardest hit. And then lastly, I'm really hoping that a coordinated effort to focus on our broadband access issues is part of what funding we can get out of this. But at the end of the day, we do live in a really good region. I hope you're not experiencing the pain that we've talked about today. If you are, these are the people you should talk to. These are the strategies you should employ or deploy. And lastly, if you're not there, but you need a little different vision for what you're doing, these are the resources, and CREDC is here to help you get connection to all of those. So just reach out to us and we want to help you.
Hey, thank you, Melissa. And thank you, Krista and Ted. Great presenters, very informative discussion. And we appreciate all the participants of giving their time here. We hope you've come away with some really good information and tips. And if you have any questions, we'll be providing the contact information for all three of our presenters in the follow-up. And I'm sure that they would be very pleased to answer any questions that you might have. So since we're out of time, I'm just going to say goodbye. Thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.